The night was cold on planet Virine 9, a lonely mining colony far away from any star trade route. The wind howled like a wild animal, blowing dust and ashes across the broken streets. The sky was dark purple, filled with drifting clouds of metal smoke from old factories. Most people stayed inside their homes, but one man sat outside near a small fire beside a half-ruined cabin. His name was Ethan, a human mechanic who lived alone at the edge of the colony. His small fire glowed weakly in the darkness. He was heating a pot of soup made from dry vegetables and a little bit of meat. Simple food, but enough for one person. He looked tired, his face rough from years of hard work, his hands covered in scars from machines. Ethan stirred the pot slowly, staring into the flames. The sound of the fire crackling was the only noise around him. He thought about how quiet his life had become since the war ended. No family, no friends left on this cold world, only machines, dust and silence. Then suddenly, he heard something, a small noise behind the wall near the corner of his cabin. It was soft, like a whimper or a whisper. Ethan frowned. Wild scavenger animals sometimes came out at night looking for food. He grabbed a metal rod lying near the fire and stood up slowly. "Who's there?" he said firmly. The wind answered with a long howl. But then there it was again, a faint trembling sound. It wasn't an animal, it was a cry. He stepped closer, his boots crunching on frozen ground. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows. Behind the broken wall he saw movement, two small figures trying to hide. Ethan stopped, shocked. They were children. One was a bit taller, maybe 10 or 11 years old. The other was tiny, perhaps 6. Their clothes were torn, covered in dust and oil. Their skin had a faint silver-blue tint and their eyes glowed softly in the dark. They were not human. They were Terran, an alien race once powerful but destroyed in the last war. The older one stared at him with fear and anger mixed together. She held a piece of metal like a knife, standing in front of the little one as if ready to protect her. The small one clutched her sister's arm, shivering. Ethan lowered the rod slowly. "Easy," he said quietly. "I'm not going to hurt you." They didn't answer. The younger girl looked at the pot of soup on the fire and then back at Ethan. Her stomach growled loud enough for him to hear. Ethan sighed. "You're hungry," he said softly. "Come out. It's too cold to stay there." The older one shook her head quickly. "No, humans kill us," she said in a weak, broken voice. "We saw them shoot the others." Ethan's heart sank. He knew she wasn't lying. Many humans still hated the Terran. Even years after the war, their kind were hunted and sold as cheap workers. "I'm not like them," Ethan said. He sat back down near the fire, showing his empty hands. "See, no weapons. Just food." The girls didn't move. The wind blew stronger, making them shiver. Ethan took an old metal bowl, filled it with hot soup, and placed it on the ground between them. "You can eat if you want," he said. "I'll stay right here." He didn't look at them again. He simply turned to the fire and started humming a soft old earth song. A few minutes passed. Then, quietly, he heard the sound of footsteps, small, careful ones. The smell of soup must have been too strong for their hunger. He glanced from the corner of his eye. The smaller girl had stepped closer, her glowing eyes wide. The older one followed, still cautious, her metal shard trembling in her hand. The younger girl took the bowl, sniffed it, and then looked up at her sister. "It's warm," she whispered. Ethan smiled a little. "Go on. It's for you." They sat down a few feet away and started eating, shaking from the cold. They ate like they hadn't eaten in days. When the smaller one coughed, Ethan quietly poured a bit of water into a cup and slid it toward her. She took it with both hands, looking surprised. When they finished, Ethan spoke again. "What are your names?" The older one hesitated. "Lyra," she said slowly. "And this is Mira, my sister." "Pretty names," Ethan said kindly. "You two from the city?" Lyra looked away. "No city. No home." Her voice broke a little. "Everyone gone." Ethan didn't ask more. He didn't need to. He could see the truth in her trembling lips and tired eyes. They had lost everything. He stood and walked to his cabin. "It's warmer inside," he said. "There's an old heater. You can sleep near it if you like." Lyra stood up quickly. "Why? Why help us?" Ethan looked at her for a moment, his face calm but heavy with old sadness. "Because someone should have helped my daughter," he said softly. But no one did. For a long moment there was silence. The only sound was the wind outside and the quiet crackle of the fire. Then Lyra nodded slowly, holding Mira's hand. Together they followed him inside. The cabin was small and simple, metal walls, an old table, 2 chairs, and a heater glowing faint orange. Ethan gave them each a blanket and set a small lamp on the table. Mira lay down first, her little face peaceful for the first time that night. Lyra stayed awake, watching Ethan from the corner. Ethan sat by the fire again, staring at the soup pot, deep in thought. He didn't know it then, but this small act of kindness, this single warm meal on a cold night, would change his life forever. Outside, the storm grew stronger. Inside, for the first time in years, there was warmth and hope. The morning sun rose weak and pale over the rusty sky of Vereen 9. The storm had passed, leaving behind broken silence and a world washed in gray. The small cabin stood quietly at the edge of the wasteland, smoke curling from its old chimney. Inside, warmth lingered, the faint smell of soup and burnt wood mixed with the hum of the heater. Ethan opened his eyes slowly. For a moment he almost forgot what had happened last night. Then he heard a soft sound, a whisper, a giggle, a child's voice. He turned his head and saw Mira, the younger alien girl, sitting on the floor near the heater, hugging a piece of metal shaped like a toy. Her sister Lyra was standing near the window, watching the sky with cautious eyes. They looked different in daylight. Their silver-blue skin glowed faintly under the soft light, and their eyes reflected the morning sun like gemstones. They looked fragile, but there was something strong and unbroken in their gaze. Ethan stood up, his old bones creaking. "Morning," he said. His voice sounded rough after years of silence. Mira looked up and smiled a little. "Morning, human," she whispered shyly. Ethan chuckled. "My name's Ethan," he said. "You can call me that." Lyra didn't smile. She crossed her arms, still keeping her distance. "Why did you let us stay?" she asked quietly. Ethan looked at her. "Because no one else would," he said simply. She didn't reply, but her hard eyes softened just a little. He spent the morning fixing an old machine outside the cabin while the girls watched. It was a broken water recycler, half buried in dirt. Mira sat nearby, humming a small tune, her legs swinging. Lyra stayed alert, eyes always scanning the horizon. "You two from the camps?" Ethan asked, not looking up from his work. Lyra's hands clenched. "We escaped," she said. "The humans came after the war. They took the old ones away. The young ones they sold. We hid in the tunnels for weeks." Ethan stopped working for a moment. He felt a familiar sting in his chest, guilt heavy and sharp. He had heard stories like this before, but never seen the truth of them in such small faces. "I'm sorry," he said softly. Lyra tilted her head. "Why are you sorry?" "You didn't do it." "Because humans did," Ethan replied. "And I am one." For a few seconds there was silence. The wind whistled through the broken metal fences around the cabin. Then Mira ran to Ethan, holding something in her tiny hands, a small piece of plastic shaped like a flower. "Look," she said proudly. "I found it." Ethan smiled and took it gently. "That used to be a part of a control panel." "You've got good eyes, little one." Mira grinned. "Can I keep it?" "Of course." Lyra looked at him again, this time without anger. "You talk to her like a father," she said softly. Ethan didn't answer. He just went back to fixing the machine. That night, the three of them ate together for the first time. Ethan cooked stew with old ration packs, adding spices he had traded for last month. Mira's laughter filled the cabin as she tried to pronounce human words. "Soap," she said proudly, showing her bowl. Ethan laughed for the first time in years. Lyra stayed quiet, but she watched him with careful eyes. She saw something different in this human. Not cruelty, not greed, but a quiet sadness. She had seen that look before on the faces of those who had lost everything. When Mira finally fell asleep, Lyra asked softly, "You said you had a daughter. What happened to her?" Ethan looked into the dying fire. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "She got sick. The doctors were far away. The war made travel impossible. By the time I reached the city, it was too late." Lyra stayed silent for a long time. She didn't know what to say. But for the first time, she understood his kindness. Days turned into weeks. Ethan started teaching them small things. How to repair old tools, how to use the water purifier, and how to read human letters. Lyra learned fast. She was sharp and curious. Mira drew pictures on scraps of paper, Mostly stars, planets, and people holding hands. The little cabin began to feel alive again. Ethan built a small bed for them using scrap wood and blankets. He even painted the walls with simple colors. Whenever the wind howled outside, the laughter of the two sisters warmed the air inside. One evening, Lyra found an old radio on his workbench. "What's this?" she asked. "It's a transmitter," Ethan said. "Used to send messages before the comm towers fell. Does it still work?" "Maybe," he said with a smile. "If someone's out there to listen." Lyra touched the buttons gently. "Our people used to sing through the stars," she said quietly. "Now, there's only silence." Ethan looked at her and saw tears in her eyes. Not fear this time, but deep sadness. He wanted to say something comforting, but words felt weak. So he placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "Then we'll make new songs." She looked up at him, surprised, and gave a small nod. That night, when the firelight flickered against the walls, Ethan lay awake. He could hear Mira's soft breathing and Lyra's quiet whisper in her alien tongue, a lullaby from a world long gone. He closed his eyes and thought of his lost daughter. For the first time in years, his heart didn't ache with emptiness. He realized something. Maybe this wasn't just about giving them food or shelter. Maybe fate had given him another chance to save someone when he couldn't before. Outside, the stars shimmered over the dark sky, and inside that small, forgotten cabin, a new kind of family began to form. Fragile, unexpected, but real. They didn't know it yet, but this bond would change not just their lives, but the destiny of worlds. The years rolled quietly across the barren colony of Virene 9, and the small cabin on the edge of the wasteland changed with them. What was once a lonely shelter for one man became a home filled with laughter, small footsteps, and the gentle hum of learning. Ethan no longer ate alone. He no longer woke to silence. Every morning began with the sound of two alien girls racing to light the small heater and arguing over who would stir the breakfast pot first. Lyra, the older sister, had grown taller and stronger. Her silver-blue skin now shimmered faintly like moonlight, and her eyes carried a calm, wise fire. Mira, still tiny and full of wonder, followed Ethan everywhere. Her questions never stopped, her laughter never faded. The days were simple, but to them, they felt like gifts. Ethan would work on repairing machines and scavenging old parts from wrecked transports, while Lyra learned to read the human letters on the crates he brought back. Mira loved painting strange glowing flowers on the cabin walls, mixing dyes from alien plants she found in the hills. One morning, Ethan was repairing an old generator behind the cabin when Lyra walked out, carrying a small metal book she had built herself. "Look," she said proudly, her voice still carrying that soft alien rhythm. "I made this with the spare circuits. It can store words." Ethan raised his brows in surprise. "You made a datapad out of junk?" Lyra nodded. "You taught us to fix things. I wanted to remember everything we learn." He smiled. "Then that's your first invention, engineer." She laughed softly, a sound that still felt rare. Mira peeked out from the doorway, her hands covered in bright paint. "I'm not engineer," she said. "I'm artist." Ethan grinned. "Then we have both, a builder and a dreamer." Life settled into quiet rhythm. Ethan taught them to grow small patches of food in rusted barrels. He taught them how to filter water from the air, and how to recognize poisonous plants in the valley. Lyra absorbed every lesson like a sponge. She could take apart a plasma engine before she turned 15. Mira, though younger, found beauty in the small things. She drew stars, birds, and strange creatures she imagined in her dreams. At night, they would sit near the fire, and Ethan would tell them stories of Earth, of oceans so big they swallowed the horizon, of green forests and blue skies, of people who built ships to touch the stars. Mira would listen with wide eyes while Lyra would ask thoughtful questions. "Why did humans fight so many wars?" she asked one night. Ethan looked into the fire. "Because we never learned how to understand what's different," he said softly. "We fear what we don't know." Lyra stared at her own hands, glowing faintly under the firelight. "Then maybe we can teach them," she whispered. One cold afternoon, Ethan took them beyond the ridge for scavenging. They found a half-buried Terran comm beacon, an ancient machine from the Lost War. Lyra's eyes widened. "This is from our people," she said. Her voice trembled slightly. Ethan knelt beside her. "Be careful, it's old tech." But Lyra's hands moved with familiarity. She brushed away the dust and opened the panel. Inside, the circuit still pulsed with a faint blue light. "It's still alive," she whispered. Mira tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Can we fix it?" Ethan hesitated. "Maybe, but if it sends a signal, someone might hear." Lyra's face darkened. "Our people are gone." Ethan looked at her, the way she said it, not with anger, but quiet sadness. "Maybe not all," he said finally. "The galaxy is wide. They brought the beacon home." For weeks, Lyra studied its design, copying the runes and reading the faint patterns on its surface. Ethan helped her understand the human circuits and power cells. Slowly, they brought it back to life, and not to send messages, but to listen. At night, it hummed softly, scanning the void. No signal came back, but it made Lyra hopeful again. Years passed. The girls grew. Lyra now helped Ethan run the repair shop he built beside the cabin. Traders began visiting again, and they whispered about the human who lives with the alien girls. Some mocked. Some respected. Ethan ignored them all. Mira would run outside every night to draw constellations in the dust with glowing stones. She called them stories in the sky. Ethan often joined her, pretending to know which star was which. One evening, as they sat outside watching the horizon, Lyra looked up and asked, "Do you think there's a place where humans and Turin can live together without fear?" Ethan smiled gently. "Maybe one day you'll build it." Lyra looked down at the glowing necklace she wore. A small silver chain Ethan had made from scrap metal shaped like a star. "Then I'll name it after you," she whispered. "But peace, no matter how gentle, never lasts forever." One night, a strange static came from the old Turin beacon. Lyra woke suddenly, the sound echoing through the cabin. She rushed to the machine, eyes wide. For the first time in years, the signal light blinked, weak but alive. She adjusted the frequency, her hands trembling. A voice came through the static, faint, broken, and in the Turin language. She recognized a few words: colony, survivors, return. Her heart pounded. Someone out there, her people. She looked at the sleeping forms of Ethan and Mira. For the first time in a decade, she felt torn between two worlds, the one that saved her, and the one that called her blood. Lyra turned off the beacon before Ethan could hear. She sat in silence until morning, staring out the window as the first light touched the barren hills. 10 years of peace had given her everything: love, warmth, family. But deep inside, a voice whispered, "You are Turin. You belong to the stars." And in that quiet moment, she knew her journey was not yet finished. The night on Vereen 9 was unusually silent. No wind, no echoes of machinery from the abandoned mines, only stillness. Inside the small cabin, the soft hum of the old Turin beacon filled the air like a heartbeat. Lyra sat in front of it, her silver blue skin glowing faintly in the darkness. Her eyes, once full of calm, now carried a storm. For 3 nights she had been secretly decoding the strange message that came through the beacon. The words were broken and incomplete, but clear enough to burn themselves into her heart. Survivors found. New colony. Need leadership. Return home, child of Turin. Lyra had read those words again and again, each time feeling the weight of destiny pressing harder. Somewhere out there her people still lived, scattered, rebuilding, waiting. And she was one of the last born of royal blood. That truth, hidden deep in her memory since she was a child, now screamed inside her. Ethan didn't know. He still believed their peaceful days would last forever. That morning he cooked breakfast as usual, whistling an old Earth tune. Mira ran around chasing the cabin's cleaning drone, giggling loudly. "Careful," Ethan laughed. "You break it, you clean it yourself." Mira grinned. "Then I'll build 2. Lyra stood at the doorway watching them. The sight twisted her heart, her family, her home, her peace. But the beacon's signal wouldn't stop calling. She whispered, 10 years, and still I never asked for where I came from." Ethan looked at her. "What was that?" She quickly smiled. "Nothing, just thinking." After breakfast, Lyra walked to the edge of the ridge alone. The wind had returned, cold and sharp. Below her lay the old mining fields, rusted machines half buried in ash. But in the distance the sky shimmered faintly, as if stars were blinking too close to the ground, a sign of ships traveling through the outer orbit. Her hands tightened around the small necklace Ethan had made her years ago. He gave me a home, she whispered, but my blood. It calls me to something bigger. She didn't want to leave, but she couldn't stay knowing her people might still be suffering. That evening, Ethan noticed Lyra's silence. She barely spoke during dinner, barely smiled at Mira's jokes. After the meal, when Mira fell asleep, he found Lyra standing by the window again, staring into the endless sky. "Something's on your mind," he said quietly. She hesitated, then asked, "Ethan, if you found out someone needed you, someone from your past, would you go to them?" Ethan looked into the fire. "I think I'd go, even if it hurt, because some things you can't run from forever." Lyra nodded slowly, her throat tight. "Even if it means leaving the people you love?" Ethan smiled sadly. "If it's truly love, they'll wait, or understand." That night she couldn't sleep. She sat beside Mira's bed, brushing the little girl's hair softly. Mira murmured in her dreams, "Lyra, don't go too far." Tears filled Lyra's eyes. "I won't," she whispered. But deep down she knew it was a lie. Before dawn, Lyra packed a small satchel, a few tools, the necklace Ethan gave her, and the beacon's crystal core. She looked around the cabin one last time. The walls still carried Mira's colorful paintings, stars, planets, 3 figures holding hands under 2 suns. Her heart twisted painfully. She walked to the table and placed 2 small objects there, her necklace and Mira's glowing stone toy. Then, with trembling fingers, she wrote a message on a scrap of metal. "You gave us life when we had nothing. You taught us what family means, but I must find who I am, and where we belong. I promise to return. Lyra." When the first light of morning touched the horizon, she stepped outside. Her ship, a small stolen shuttle she had repaired months ago, waited behind the ridge, hidden under a tarp. The moment she turned it on, the engines hummed softly, like a heartbeat ready to take flight. She looked back at the cabin, the only true home she'd ever known. Her chest ached with every breath. "Goodbye, Father," she whispered, her voice breaking, and then the ship lifted, vanishing silently into the dawn sky. When Ethan woke up, the cabin was quiet. Too quiet. The heater still glowed, the stew pot still warm, but the chairs were empty. Mira was still asleep in her bed, holding her blanket tight. Lyra's bed, though, it was empty. Ethan called out, "Lyra?" No answer. He searched outside, thinking she might be fixing something or exploring the ridge, but all he found were footprints in the dust, leading away from the cabin and stopping where the ground was burned by ship thrusters. His stomach dropped. He went back inside and saw the note. His hands trembled as he read it. The words blurred through the tears that filled his eyes. Mira woke up moments later and ran to him. "Where's Lyra?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. Ethan couldn't answer. He knelt down, hugged her tightly, and said softly, "She's gone for now. But she'll come back." Mira began to cry, and Ethan held her, feeling her small heart beat against his chest. "She promised, didn't she?" he whispered. "We'll wait." Days turned into weeks. Ethan didn't touch Lyra's tools or her chair. He left everything as it was. Every night he would light a candle beneath the necklace she left behind and stare at the stars. "Wherever you are," he murmured, "I hope they treat you like I did." 10 years passed. Seasons came and went, the colony changed, and the cabin aged. But the candle never stopped burning, and one quiet evening, long after Ethan had stopped expecting it, the sky above Virene 9 began to tremble. A massive ship, glowing silver and blue, broke through the clouds, descending straight toward his cabin. 10 long years had passed since the morning Lyra disappeared into the sky. For Ethan, each sunrise had been the same, quiet, slow, and heavy. The once lively cabin had turned still again. The laughter that once filled its walls had faded, replaced by the soft hum of machines and the whisper of memory. He still lived in the same place, though the world around him had changed. The mining fields were dead now, abandoned to time. Traders no longer came this far out. Only the wind visited, blowing through the rusted metal towers and broken pipes like a ghost song. Inside the cabin, Ethan sat by the fire, staring at the 2 necklaces hanging on the wall. One silver, one glowing faintly blue. Every evening, he lit a candle beneath them and whispered the same words. "Wherever you are, girls, I hope you found peace." That night, the wind carried something new, a strange vibration. It started low, like thunder beyond the mountains. Then it grew louder, deeper until the entire cabin trembled. The candle flame flickered wildly. Ethan stood up slowly, his heart pounding. Outside, the ground shook. Tools rattled on the shelves. From the horizon came a light, bright, pure, and massive, cutting through the darkness like a rising sun. He stepped out of the cabin, shielding his eyes. The sky itself was splitting open. Clouds tore apart as a giant silver-blue starship descended from the heavens. Its surface shimmered like liquid glass, covered with markings in both human and alien script. The air roared as the ship hovered above the ground, its engines glowing with radiant energy. Ethan stumbled backward, awe written across his weathered face. "By the stars," he whispered. "What is that?" The ship's lower deck opened, releasing a surge of light so bright that the dusty ground sparkled like crystal. From that light, several figures emerged. Tall, armored soldiers with smooth helmets and glowing emblems on their chests. They moved with precision and silence, their steps leaving faint ripples in the dust. At their center stood two women, one regal, one gentle. Ethan's breath caught. The first woman walked forward, tall and confident. Her long hair shimmered silver under the glow of the ship, and her armor bore the ancient sigil of the Turin, a symbol of a rising star within a ring of light. Her eyes, bright violet and fierce, met his, and in that moment, time stopped. It was Lyra, older, stronger, radiant. Beside her stood another woman, shorter, with a soft smile and eyes full of tears. Mira, now grown, her childlike glow replaced with calm grace. Ethan froze. His lips parted, but no sound came out. He stared at them like a man staring at ghosts. "Lyra, Mira," he finally managed to whisper. Lyra's voice trembled as she spoke. "Father," she said softly, the word heavy with love and time. "We found you." For a few seconds, Ethan couldn't move. Then his knees gave out and he sank into the dust, tears burning in his tired eyes. "You came back," he said, voice shaking. "After all these years, you came back." Lyra knelt in front of him, her armor gleaming under the setting sun. "We never forgot you," she said. "We could never." Mira rushed forward and hugged him tightly, her voice breaking. "You waited for us. We thought you'd be gone." Ethan laughed through his tears, hugging her back. "I'm too stubborn to die before saying hello again." Behind them, the soldiers stood silently, watching the reunion with quiet respect. When they entered the cabin, Lyra looked around with glistening eyes. Everything was the same heater, the same tools, even the painted walls with Mira's childhood drawings. Dust covered most of it, but Ethan had kept it all. "You kept our home alive," Lyra whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. Didn't know what else to do. "You girls took the noise with you when you left." Mira touched the necklace hanging on the wall, the one she left behind. It still glowed faintly. "You lit candles for us?" "Every night," Ethan said. "Didn't miss a single one." Lyra turned to him, her voice soft but full of pride. "Ethan, things changed after I left. The message I followed led me to the remnants of our people, hidden, broken, and afraid. I helped them rebuild. I used everything you taught me: compassion, patience, courage. You didn't just feed 2 orphans. You saved an entire race." Ethan stared at her in disbelief. "I did nothing special," Lyra smiled. "You did what no one else would. You were kind." She stepped closer, holding out a small cube made of silver light. It expanded in her hand, revealing a hologram, a world floating in space. Cities shimmered across its surface, glowing blue and gold. "This," Lyra said, "is our new home. The Turin live again." "We named the first city Aethera, and after you." Ethan blinked. "After me?" "You are the reason we exist," Lyra said firmly. "You're the bridge between humanity and the Turin. Our people honor you as a symbol, the human who fed the stars." Ethan sat down slowly, overwhelmed. I just wanted you to be safe." Mira knelt beside him, smiling through tears. "And because of that, millions are safe now." Lyra handed him a small metallic device. "This is a pass. Your ship waits above. You can come with us, live among us. You'll never be alone again." Ethan looked at her for a long time. His eyes softened. "I think I already have everything I ever wanted. Right here." Lyra placed a gentle hand over his. "Then let us stay. Just for a while." He nodded, his throat too tight for words. Outside, the great ship stood silently against the twilight sky, casting long shadows across the barren land. Inside the cabin, laughter filled the air once again, the same sound that once turned a house into a home. And as the stars rose above Vereen 9, Ethan finally realized something. Sometimes kindness doesn't echo in the same day. Sometimes it travels across galaxies and comes back in the shape of love. Would you like me to continue with part 6, The Truth Revealed? 800 words next, where Lyra tells Ethan everything about how she became the High Emissary and how the galaxy now honors humanity through his name. You said, start with part 6, more unique 800 words, ChatGPT said. Part 6, The Truth Revealed. 800 words, third person, simple English. Emotional and cinematic tone for HFY voice narration. The night air shimmered with soft blue light from the massive starship parked beyond the cabin. Its engines pulsed gently like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. Inside the cabin, everything felt warm again. The fire crackled, the air smelled faintly of soup, and laughter, real laughter, filled the small space that had once been silent for years. Ethan sat across from Lyra and Mira, studying them with quiet wonder. He could hardly believe these were the same fragile girls he'd once found starving behind a wall. Now they wore shining armor and royal insignias. Their every movement carried grace and strength, but their smiles were still the same. Mira was excited, talking faster than ever. You should have seen the fleet, Ethan. It stretches across the horizon. Hundreds of ships. We have schools, cities, gardens that float above the sea. It's beautiful. Ethan chuckled softly. You make it sound like paradise. Lyra smiled faintly. It's far from perfect, but it's a beginning. Our people call it Turin Prime now. A world reborn from ashes. She looked at the fire, her voice softening. You deserve to know the truth, Ethan. All of it? Ethan nodded, leaning back. I figured there was more to this than just a reunion. Lyra exhaled slowly. When I left that morning, I thought I was only going to find survivors. But I found something else, and I found the truth about who I am. She paused, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. I am not just Turin. I am the last heir of the House of Valira, the royal family that once ruled the Turin Dominion before the war destroyed it. The humans who invaded our worlds didn't know I survived. The mark of my bloodline was hidden, the glowing crest behind my left ear. Ethan's eyes widened. You were royalty? All along? Lyra nodded. Yes, but I was just a child when the bombs fell. My mother sent me away with Mira and a few guardians. Only Mira and I survived. For years I forgot who I was. The war erased everything, our names, our history, our home. Until the beacon's signal found me. Mira reached out, taking Lyra's hand gently. When she found the survivors, they didn't even know what peace meant anymore. They were angry, lost, ready to fight again. Lyra's face darkened. They wanted revenge. They wanted to destroy humanity for what happened. Ethan's chest tightened. And you stopped them? Lyra nodded. I remembered what you taught us, Ethan. That kindness can rebuild what hate destroys. I stood before generals and warlords, and I told them, I lived among humans. I saw compassion. I saw love. They laughed at me at first, but I didn't stop. I built bridges instead of weapons. Slowly our people began to listen. Her eyes met his. It wasn't power that saved them. It was your lesson. Ethan swallowed hard, emotions tightening his throat. Lyra, I didn't do anything grand. I just gave you food and shelter. Lyra smiled sadly. To us, that was more than food. You gave us hope. You showed us what it means to care. Even when it's not your responsibility, you reminded us that humanity is not cruelty, it's compassion. Mira stood up and went to the small shelf. She took down one of Ethan's old hand tools, the same one he had used to build her first toy when she was a child. This, she said, holding it up, is what started it all. When Lyra became the High Emissary, she placed this very tool in the Hall of Origins on Turin Prime. It's displayed under your name. Ethan blinked, speechless. You did what? Lyra smiled softly. Our people know your story. They call you the Builder of Warmth. Every year on the day of rebirth, children retell your story. The human who fed 2 orphans and unknowingly rebuilt a civilization. Ethan covered his face with his hands. His voice cracked. You two turned my small kindness into a legend. Lyra reached forward and placed her hand on his. Because it was more than kindness. You changed the path of an entire species. Outside, the night deepened. The blue glow from the ship bathed the land in soft light. Mira opened the cabin door, stepping into the cool air. "Lyra," she called, "they're waiting for you." Lyra nodded, then looked back at Ethan. "There's one more thing I need to tell you." Ethan tilted his head. "Go on." Lyra hesitated, her voice trembling. "When the High Council of Turin offered me the title of Supreme Regent, I refused. Instead, I created something else, the Alliance of Two Suns. It's a pact between humans and Turin, a promise that our future will be shared, not divided." Ethan's eyes widened. "Humans agreed to that?" Lyra smiled faintly. "Not all of them, but many did. There are diplomats, engineers, and explorers from Earth who now live among us. They wear your story like armor," Mira added softly. "Your name is written in both languages on the Alliance Stone. Ethan Hayes, the human who fed hope." Ethan sat quietly for a long time, overwhelmed. Then he laughed softly, wiping his eyes. "I never thought an old mechanic from a dust world would end up in an alien history book." Lyra stood and smiled warmly. "You didn't just end up in a book. You live in every heart that remembers mercy." The fire flickered low as silence settled. Ethan looked at the two women, the daughters of another world, yet his family in every way that mattered. "You've done well," he said softly. "Better than I ever could have." Lyra stepped forward and embraced him tightly. "We just followed what you showed us." Outside, the soldiers waited beside the glowing ship, their eyes reflecting the orange light from the fire through the window. The night wind carried the scent of the earth, mixed with the hum of alien engines and the soft crackle of warmth. As the stars shimmered above them, Ethan realized that the small act he once thought meaningless, feeding two hungry girls, had changed galaxies. And for the first time in years, he smiled without sadness. The morning sky over Vereen 9 glowed with a soft golden hue. The once-forgotten planet, silent and cold for decades, now looked alive again under the reflection of the great Turin ship hovering above. Birds, rare mechanical ones from the colony ruins, flew across the light, their metal wings flashing silver in the dawn. Inside the small cabin, Ethan sat quietly beside the fire. His hands trembled slightly as he held the small cube Lyra had given him the night before, a holographic window into another world. When he activated it, a swirl of blue light filled the air. The projection showed an entire planet orbiting twin suns, its seas glowing like liquid glass. Floating cities drifted above the clouds, and grand towers of crystal reached toward the heavens. In the middle of the planet shone a vast monument shaped like two hands, one human, one Turin, joined together in eternal friendship. Beneath them, carved in both languages, were the words, "Kindness lights the stars," dedicated to Ethan Hayes and the human who fed hope. Ethan's throat tightened. He never imagined that one meal, given in silence and compassion, could lead to something so vast and eternal. The cabin door opened softly. Lyra entered wearing her royal cloak of silver and blue. Her armor was gone. She looked less like a leader and more like the girl he had once known, curious, brave, and kind. Mira followed her, holding a small crystal orb that pulsed faintly with light. "Morning, Father," Lyra said softly. "You didn't sleep, did you?" Ethan smiled tiredly. "Old men like me don't need much sleep. Just good memories." Mira set the orb down in front of him. "This is for you," she said. "It contains the voices of our people, their thanks, their stories, their songs. We call it the Heart of Gratitude." The orb glowed brighter for a moment, and a chorus of voices filled the room. Soft, melodic, full of emotion. Words in the Turin language flowed through the air, but even without understanding them, Ethan felt the meaning. Each voice was saying the same thing in its own way. "Thank you." Tears rolled down his cheeks as he whispered, "I don't deserve all this." Lyra knelt in front of him, taking his hand. "You do. You gave without expecting anything in return. That is what makes it pure." Outside, the Turin soldiers were preparing to leave. The air shimmered with energy as the engines began to hum. Ethan looked out the window and sighed. "So this is it, huh? You two heading back to your kingdom among the stars?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Our people need us, but we didn't come only to thank you. We came to bring you with us," Ethan blinked. "Me?" Mira grinned. "You'll love it there. The cities float above oceans and the sunsets are double, two suns meeting at the horizon. There's a place for you, already waiting. You'd have your own garden, your own workshop, and a home by the sea. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. Sounds like heaven. It's home, Lyra said softly. And it would mean everything to us if you came. He stood up slowly, walking around the cabin. His eyes fell on every small memory. The painted walls where Mira had drawn her stars. The table where Lyra once learned to read. The heater that had kept them alive through the first winter. This place, he said quietly, it's full of ghosts. Good ones. The kind I don't want to leave behind. Lyra's eyes softened. We can rebuild it there if you wish. The same way. Every wall, every drawing. Our people would honor it, he smiled at her, his tired eyes glistening. No need. The memories are already built inside me. For a while no one spoke. The hum of the engines outside grew stronger. Lyra stood and reached into her cloak. She took out a small pendant, a crystal shard shaped like a teardrop, and placed it around his neck. This is from our capital, she said. It's called the Light of Return. As long as it glows, it means your name is remembered in every home of Turin Prime. Ethan held it gently, feeling its faint warmth. That's too much for one old man, Lyra smiled softly. It's not enough for what you've done. When they finally stepped outside, the morning light washed over them. The ship loomed above, majestic and silent. The soldiers bowed as Lyra passed, their armor reflecting the soft sunlight. Mira ran ahead, waving to Ethan. Come on, you have to see the stars from up there. They look close enough to touch. Ethan laughed, the sound deep and free. But his laughter faded when he reached the cabin door. He turned and looked back one last time. The little home stood just as it had for decades. Weathered, humble, but full of history. It wasn't made of gold or crystal, yet it had built something greater than any empire. He whispered, "Goodbye, old friend," and stepped into the light. As the ship ascended, the cabin grew smaller and smaller below them, until it disappeared completely. Ethan stood by the window, watching the curve of the planet fade beneath clouds and firelight. Beside him, Lyra and Mira stood proudly, no longer orphans, but leaders of a reborn people. Lyra looked at him and said softly, "Do you see, Father? This is your legacy." Ethan smiled faintly. "It's beautiful. But my real legacy is right here beside me." Mira squeezed his hand. "Then we'll make sure your name never fades." The ship rose higher, cutting through the thin layer of atmosphere. Outside the window stretched the vast sea of stars, endless, bright, and alive. Ethan watched them, his eyes filled with peace. "You know," he said quietly, "I always wondered if kindness ever mattered in a world full of cruelty. Now I see, it does. It always does." Lyra leaned her head against his shoulder. "You proved it, Father. You made the galaxy believe again." As the ship drifted toward the twin suns, their light filled the cabin. Golden, soft, eternal. Ethan closed his eyes, smiling as warmth surrounded him. For the first time in decades, his heart was light. No pain, no loneliness, only peace. The story of one man's kindness had crossed the stars, turning strangers into family and sorrow into hope. And as the great ship disappeared into the light, the universe remembered that a simple act of love could change the fate of worlds.